Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Vega Insights. I'm here today with Kevin Lawrence, and Kevin is the director of the American Board of Imaging Informatics, otherwise known as ABII. And we're going to talk a little bit about ABII and the certification that they oversee, which is the Certified Imaging Informatics Professional certification. Before we get started, we're going to read a disclaimer. So the views and opinions shared in this episode do not constitute as an endorsement by the American Board of Imaging Informatics of Vega Imaging Informatics or its products and services. So with that being said, let's get into it. We're going to start with just an introduction to ABII for those that aren't as familiar. Kevin, why don't you just inform us a little bit about the history of ABII?
Sure, I'm happy to. And thanks for having me today, Luke. I appreciate the opportunity. So the history of ABII. ABII was formed as a result of a collaboration between SIM, the Society for Imaging Informatics and Medicine, and the ARRT, which is the American Registry of Radiologic Technologists. So they came to the table, put their heads together, and that's how ABII was formed. And that happened almost 20 years ago. The first exams were administered in 2007. So we are getting ready to celebrate 20 years of the certifying qualified imaging informatics professionals.
Yeah, that's amazing when you think about it. You know, really from the early days of PACS and imaging informatics, ABII was there, and the fact that they're still there today with all the changes in the industry and regulatory changes and governance changes, it's really an amazing thing to see how important certification in the field has been over the years and still continues to be today. I think part of that is due to having the right mission and the right values that continue to be held as important. I'm going to read off ABII's mission, which is defining the effective application of the wide range of imaging informatics. This is evident by the multiple domains that make up our test content outline. ABII certifies imaging informaticists possessing the body of knowledge that we believe is essential in the management of healthcare information systems and the set of values that they employ. So the ABII demonstrates integrity through our commitment to honesty, transparency, and collaboration. We promote exceptional quality patient care by defining the effective application of the wide range of imaging informatics and certifying informaticists. We foster lifelong learning by promoting the maintenance of professional competence and knowledge of the continuously advancing domain of imaging informatics. So, I mean, with all of that being said, what really stands out to me there is, a commitment to quality and improved patient care outcomes, which, for me really struck me as, relatable. I have those same core values, and I want to be associated with a certification that mirrors those same values. And I know many others out there share that same aspiration. And so I think those things have been very important over the years and will continue to be. Another thing that I should mention as a disclosure is I myself am a board member for ABII. And for those of you that know Kevin, how long have you been on staff with ABII?
Yeah, so I've been on staff with ABII since 2023.
Okay. Yeah, and so there's been some exceptional leadership over the years, and the board has been very pleased with Kevin and his work and all the work that not only Kevin, but there's also members of the ARRT that contribute significant work efforts to the success of ABII. And so it's really a strong team between the board and the staff at ARRT and ABII that contribute to everything that goes on. So at this time, I'd like to introduce, for those that aren't that familiar with the CIIP, just a little bit about, what are the qualifications and what does the test content outline look like and so forth. So I'm going to share my screen now, and we're going to go through some of the basics here. So Kevin, lead me through, let's start with the qualifications here. what does it take to be eligible to sit for the certification?
Sure, that's a great question. And that's the first place we start whenever someone calls. I take them directly to this page. So what we want to look at is the 7-point qualification system. And if you click on that link, it's going to take you to a file that shows you there's 3 primary areas or pillars within this document. And it's designed to give a range of options to qualify for the exam between the categories of experience, academic education, and continuing education. We're looking for a blend of these different areas. And so as you can see here, there are minimum and maximum point requirements assigned to these different categories. So for example, in the experience category, we're looking for 1 point minimum requirement in this category. And that 1 point is equivalent to 12 months of work, experience in the field. So, and you see the type of experience that we're looking for, either as a credentialed healthcare imaging professional or healthcare IT professional, healthcare informatics professional, or non-certified radiologic technologist in the military. So, if people ever have questions on do I qualify, if they're questioning that, they can always reach out to us at the office at info@abii.org, and I can walk you through this. The next category would be academic education. Notice that there's no minimum requirement for this. So you can not have your degree. You can be actively pursuing your degree. You can have a master's, and you're going to get points allotted for whatever you have there. The other component to this blend is continuing education. So the ABII Board of Trustees felt that it was important for people interested in pursuing the certification to show that they have recent, relevant, continuing education that helps not only prepare them for sitting for the exam, but really shows that they've got that knowledge, that baseline education. So you'll see here, there's a 1 point minimum requirement in that CE category, and it's equivalent to 10 hours of work there. So the caveat with that is that the continuing education has to be relevant to our test content outline. So that would be the next place that I refer people to. Once we walk through the 7-point qualification system here, and you can see that you have enough points to qualify, then we naturally move into the test content outline.
Yeah. And I've mentored a lot of people about this, and I think a lot of folks that maybe don't come from a traditional imaging informatics background, which, by the way, nobody does. Everybody's got different backgrounds. You might come from an RT background or IT background, or maybe just completely outside of healthcare. But it's pretty common for me to hear that I don't think I'd qualify for this because of my background. And then when you dig into it, they start to see, hey, maybe I'm only 1 or 2 points away from actually being eligible here. Or, if you're still quite away from being eligible, the important thing is getting on the right path, understanding, okay, I need, to get a couple more experience points and a couple more continuing education points, or whatever the case is, and then getting yourself on the path to doing that. So I think starts with understanding the requirements, and I would just encourage everyone, if this is something interesting to you, just get on the path. Take the first step to getting the points you need to take the certification. But of course, just having the points doesn't mean you're ready for the exam, right, Kevin? So let's talk a little bit about the test itself. And we've got a place for that on the website as well, about the test and the test content outline, right?
Right. So, but before you go there, here on this page, you're going to see more information about the test, how many questions are on it, what the fees are, what all that looks like, and it's going to provide you with more links to if you want to take that exam at a Pearson testing center, or if you want to take advantage of our online proctored option. So really spend some time taking a look at this page too before you get into that test content outline. But once you do, the test content outline is another great place to start looking at the exam.
Okay, so let's see here. This is continually updated. I think we're on a 5-year
Every
update
5 years.
cycle,
Yep.
right? So 2024 was the last update. Yeah, tell us a little bit about this outline.
So this outline is meticulously created so that there is a wide breadth of knowledge that is present and needed in order to pass the IIP certification exam. You see 10 domains here. It's got everything from procurement to medical imaging informatics, communications, some project management work. It's really designed to create like a comprehensive baseline level of education for entry level into imaging informatics.
And so we can dig into each one of these knowledge base areas and get an outline of the different concepts. And I love this because it sort of acts as a study guide. When I studied for my CIIP exam years ago, you got to be honest with yourself. If you understand some of these concepts, great. If not, maybe get a list going of the areas you need to brush up in. And some of these areas I had to take separate classes in, but only you know what you're strong in and what you're weaker in. And this is a great tool to help someone prepare themselves for the exam. And another great thing here is that, uh, as you mentioned, this whole exam was meticulously put together strategically by imaging informatics experts in the field. And so for somebody new, um, sometimes you don't know what you don't know. But now with this, you have a guide. What should I learn to get the foundations under me so that I can come into the field, with a strong foundation and ready to build on that. And so I love that about this TCO. And I think it's great that it's reviewed every 5 years, stays up to date with the changes in the field and everything. So,
Right.
um,
And there's a lot of work that happens within that 5 years between test content outlines getting published. There is a robust and, again, meticulous process in which we have task inventories. So we're surveying people in the field saying, what are you doing in your role? What is relevant to this to this exam? We want to make sure that this exam truly represents what people are doing out in the field. We do practice analysis. It's a very psychometrically sound and curated exam.
in fact, the process that ABII uses to create the test content outline is very similar to the process like the ARRT uses with their practice analysis and so forth, right? So I think it's important to note that, ABII uses best practices in this space to construct the test and to maintain it. Uh, and so those that are able to pass the test know that they're passing a test that's been properly administrated, according to best practices, just in the field of certification management, right?
And to an earlier point you made about the test content outline and reviewing the information that's in there to see where your strengths are and what you might need to brush up on. And you had also mentioned backgrounds that people have in either imaging or in informatics or the IT space. So it is interesting to note that it's about a 40-40 split. So there's 40% of CIIPs that have some sort of an RT or imaging background. And there's 40% that have that IT background. So, and then of course, there's the other category. But So when people come to me and ask me, about preparing for the exam, I first ask them, what is your background? Because that's going to really drive how you're going to review this test content outline. If you've got that imaging background, you can see what's familiar on this test content outline, and maybe you want to focus more on the IT components within this TCO. And conversely, if you've got that IT background, you might want to look more on the radiology or imaging specific content that's in this outline.
Yep. That's exactly what happened to me. I came from an RT background, and so I knew I had to brush up on the IT components. And interestingly, the areas where I was weaker going in, I actually scored higher on the test because I put in a lot of effort to brush up on those areas that I was weaker in going into the test. And I think that's what it's all about. It's not just about getting that piece of paper that says you're certified. It's about your actual knowledge and preparing yourself for success in your field, and becoming well-rounded, because more well-rounded you can be, the more knowledge you have, the farther you're going to go. Okay, so let's talk a little bit now about maintaining the certification, because the story's not over once you pass the test, right? There's always um, continuing education and things, right? So let's talk a little bit about that um, part of it. Kevin, tell me a little bit about maintaining the certification.
Certainly. So once you've earned your CIIP and you get your digital badge and you've got your credentials, then you have to maintain your certification. So part of that is your annual renewal that you have to do, that you have to maintain compliance with. But then in addition to that, you have continuing education requirements that you have to maintain. And so that is 24 hours of CE every 2 years. Now, the nice thing about that is if you are earning continuing education for other credentials or certifications that you're also maintaining, like for instance, I would use myself or you, Luke, as an example. If you have a radiography certification that you're earning CE for, um, if you are strategic with the CE that you earn, you can use it for both. So as long as it maps to the test content outline and is relevant to subject matter within that, you can use the CE that you're earning to maintain your other certification for this as well. So that's a common question that we get is, I'm already earning 24 CEs for my RT. Do I have to earn another 24 for this too? No, not necessarily. You just need to make sure that it is information that you've learned that maps to the test content out.
Yeah, and in my experience, if I'm taking CEs that apply to my RT, they're almost always going to apply to the test content outline, because there's a clinical engineering component to the test content outline. And so I don't really have to worry too much whether or not I'm going to be able to double dip with this CE credit. Um, I try to find CEs that are more on the informatics side or more relevant to what I do. But, honestly, for the different phases of my career, knowledge that's purely clinical has helped me in many ways in imaging informatics, being able to talk the talk with radiologists or analyze an AI data request that's very clinical in nature. There's just so many use cases for having purely clinical knowledge of radiology and other medical imaging specialties. Um, and the same with IT, get on calls where you're troubleshooting DICOM connectivity issue and there's network issues. You need just general IT knowledge. And so continuing education that you do to expand your general IT knowledge is going to help you in different ways. And so I think it's fantastic that the CE requirements are set up in a way where people that are spending a lot of effort and money to earn CEs to maintain their RT or their IT certifications, they get credit for that with ABII, and I think that's fantastic. So, so Kevin, I see that we've got the 24 CE biennium requirements, which is right in line with the ARRT for their biennium requirements. What about this 10-year requirements? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So every 10 years, SIPs will have to complete a 10-year requirement. And then really nice thing about ABII and the way that the Board of Trustees have set this up is that you have several options in order to complete this. And I know that many people look at this and think it's intimidating, but trust me when I tell you that it has a wide latitude of options that really make it easy for you to complete. There are 4 different categories to choose from in order to complete your 10-year requirements. You can do education. Now that can be providing a lecture to a group of non-SIPs. You have to do 2 hours of lecture. They don't have to be in one sitting. So you can do 2 1-hour lectures. You provide us with a sample of your slides and your outline, and our committee reviews it, and that can fulfill your requirements. In addition, you can also mentor somebody that is interested in becoming a CIIP. You document how that mentorship goes, what are the elements that you mentored them on, get some attestation statements completed. That can fulfill your requirement. Another option is the practice option. So that is a report that you can write up on a quality improvement project that you've completed within 36 months prior to the 10-year requirement window. So again, this is work that you're doing likely every day as a imaging informaticist in some way, shape, or form. So all you have to do is write it up. Another option would be the research option. So if you've published in a peer-reviewed journal, for example, if you're an author or a co-author on something like that, you can provide us with a link or a copy of your research, and that fulfills your 10-year requirement. And of course, if none of that interests you, you can choose the retest option. You can sit and re-examine. But it's really nice that ABII offers such a wide range of opportunities or options to complete this exam. So if you have test anxiety and the last thing you want to do is sit for another exam to recertify, you don't have to. You can choose one of the other options. If standing in front of a group of people and giving a presentation isn't really your thing, you can mentor a colleague that's interested in the certification, and that can qualify. So it's a really nice program that ABII has put together.
And I acknowledge that there are some certifications in the world that make you retest every so often, every 10 years or whatever. And I'm glad that ABII, you have that as an option, but there's other options. Personally, I found the practice pathway good for me, since I'm a practicing imaging informatics professional. I never had a problem finding a project that I could describe in the form of a report and meet the requirements here. Of course, everybody's different, and you've got these 4 main pathways to do your 10-year requirements. But I think I speak for most of the SIPs out there that we're happy that there are alternatives to having to retest every 10 years. And the fact that we have this requirement just adds more validity to the certification, and respect as a certification that's not just one that you get and you're good forever, or there's very limited requirements. In fact, I think ABII's continuing education requirements are exactly what's needed for the industry. It's a challenge to keep up with it, but it's not impossible or so much of a burden that it turns people away from maintaining their certification.
That's exactly right. I think the ABII Board of Trustees have done a really good job of reviewing the requirements to make sure that they're realistic, they're valuable. There's value behind this continuing education, whether it's the biennial CE or the tenure requirements. It's showing growth in your profession. But they've reviewed all of this to make sure that it's value added, but also they've worked hard to remove barriers wherever possible. So you have a wide range of opportunities to earn CE, to earn that continuing education, or to complete your tenure requirements. It's not just a very narrow pathway. There's a lot of options for you.
Yeah. I'm going to come off screen sharing now. And I want to dive into what you mentioned there, the value of the certification. I think that's the $1 million question for both prospective candidates for the certification and also those that are currently certified, wondering if they should maintain it. It has to have value. And so what comes to mind for you, Kevin, when we talk about the value of this SIT?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is, anytime you can earn a certification, it's showing to your employers, to the public, that you know what you're doing. You have passed a comprehensive, rigorous exam that is psychometrically sound and industry backed, that proves you know what you're doing and you are going to make an excellent imaging informaticist in the field.
Yeah. I can sort of speak to that because in my career, I started off as an RT, and I think employers saw me as probably somebody that's sound clinically, but unproven in the other aspects of imaging informatics. And so it was a journey getting my certification, and it forced me to become more well-rounded. And once I had that certification, it proves a level of competency in a wide range of knowledge bases. And it did allow me to advance in my career, not just because employers required it and it allowed me to get different positions, but it was more about the skills that I was forced to brush up on and the things that I was able to do in my career, which allowed me to grow in my career. And so I think career advancement is an interesting thing for imaging informatics professionals because unlike some other medical specialties, this certification is not required to get the job. It's not required by law, I should say, or maybe by accreditation, unlike, some other certifications. And so you have to prove yourself as a professional. And so having the certification is always going to be good for you, but most importantly, brushing up on the areas that you're weaker in and being able to actually perform in all of these areas is really the most important thing. Another thing I want to touch on is I'm sure everybody has come across those in the field that just kind of scoff at certifications or maybe education and degrees in general. Like, I think there's some truth to the fact that, having a bunch of degrees or certifications don't really matter unless you can show it in practice, right? Unless you can actually do something. But I'm always cautious about people, like, for instance, when I'm hiring that have that sort of attitude, because I wonder if there's an attitude of unwillingness or fear of being tested against something that they aren't very strong in, or, like I said, an unwillingness to expand their skill set in different areas. And so I think it was ingrained in me from when I started in my radiography program that being in this field, the healthcare field, is all about putting the patient first. Everything I do in my career is for the improvement of the quality of care that we can provide together as a healthcare workforce. And it became clear to me right away that, I had to be honest with myself if I wanted to be my best, I had to brush up in the areas that I was weaker in and be willing to take the risk of, being tested on these things. And I could have possibly failed. And, everybody has a fear of failing. And sometimes that could be a driver. It drove me. I didn't want to fail. So I had to study hard and I had to work hard with the people around me to help me grow to get to where I wanted to be. And I'm proud of being able to have the certification and the things that I've achieved in my career. And I don't think it would have been possible without the guidance from ABII getting me on the right track to really understand the knowledge base areas that I need to brush up in and kind of forcing me to brush up in those areas. So I always have a grateful place in my heart to ABII, and I'm proud to be able to give back and serve ABII on the board. But I think for many others out there, I want to just encourage them to take the chance and put yourself on the pathway for certification, even though you may not understand why some of the things are on the test content outline, or you may not even agree that this is something that's important. But I would just encourage you to go for it, trust in the process, and could be surprised at the things that could be possible in your career. So I'd like to just spend the last few minutes here talking about it from the employer's perspective, Kevin.
Sure.
What do you hear from candidates about, do you hear about candidates that are inquiring about the exam because their employer is encouraging them to take the exam? Or what are you seeing in that space?
Yes, I have seen a shift in the relatively short time I've been with ABII since 2023. I have seen more and more employers starting to require this certification. Again, they're looking for that baseline wide breadth of knowledge. So yes, I just got back from a conference this week where that's attended by radiology administrators, managers, that type of demographic. And I had employers coming up to me telling me that they had some staff that had just seen me at a previous conference and they were inquiring about the certifications. And so then the employers from that perspective wanted to come and get more information on it because maybe they hadn't heard about us or they just wanted more information from the horse's mouth, so to speak. Yeah. But there's a growing interest in the certification and not only among people interested in earning the certification, but employers looking and recognizing the value of that certification.
Yeah. The other side of my professional life, serving as the president and CEO here at Vega Imaging Informatics, I wear the employer hat and I often, review resumes, interview folks for different roles. And definitely here within my company, the CIIP is required for some positions. And for any sort of technical position, I want to see those folks putting themselves on the pathway to certification if they're not already certified. But I am an imaging informatics professional. So even without the certification, I'm able to properly interview and quiz candidates on imaging informatics concepts. But I think about the many employers, around the world that don't have CIIPs in executive leadership positions, trying to determine which candidates are proficient in imaging informatics to fill these roles. How can they determine, one from the other if they themselves can't drum up interview questions that they would even know the answers to, And so the certification can really be that helping hand to those employers that need a baseline, are looking for something to establish some sort of foundational knowledge in imaging informatics for the role they're trying to fill. So I would encourage employers to use that as a tool. And another thing that many employers may or may not be aware of is that if you're working on the provider side, if you're running a practice of some sort, I'm sure you're familiar with ACR accreditation. And ACR puts out what they call practice parameters. And I'm going to show my screen again, and we're going to go through probably the most important standard that was put forth by the ACR. It was a combined effort of the ACR, AAPM, which is physicists, and SIM, Society of Imaging Informatics, Medicine. And in this technical standard for the electronic practice of medical imaging, they define all these different roles, physicist, and what does a qualified medical physicist look like? What does a qualified radiologic technologist look like? And they define what a qualified imaging informatics professional should look like. And within this guidance, you will see ABII listed as one of the ways to help qualify an imaging informatics professional. And for those practices that are looking to align with industry best practices for the various roles within their practice, you have to look no further than this guidance here. And this guidance is often referenced in a number of practice parameters, like the practice parameter for digital radiography. There's a new one that was just released for medical imaging AI, and you'll find the same guidance being referenced in these practice parameters. And so while it's still not a requirement for ACR accreditation, if you're trying to align with the practice parameters and best practices, hiring CIIPs to fill the imaging informatics professional roles within your institution is a way to do that alignment. So I just wanted to mention that. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing now again. And I think ultimately, what it comes down to for many employers is their commitment to the highest quality. ABII sets the standard for the highest quality certification in imaging informatics that exists in the world. And so if you have a company or a practice that has a mission statement or goals that you want to be of the highest quality, then you should consider hiring folks that have aligned with that standard and become certified by the highest level of certification in imaging informatics that exists. I think oftentimes there are, many practices and companies that have these types of mission statements, but either they're just not aware of the certification in imaging informatics, or they don't actually value the role of imaging informatics. They don't understand the value. And there's a whole series of articles that I wrote on this topic of example situations. These are fictitious situations, but many could probably find them relatable. You can find these articles on the Vega Informatics website and many other places online, but basically just describing how important good imaging informatics professionals can be from a financial standpoint, from a patient care standpoint, from a legal liability standpoint. In my personal experience, in an earlier stage in my career, I got to travel the world and meet with many practices of different types, outpatient imaging centers, hospitals, teleradiology practices. And it was the trend that I kept seeing was those practices that invested in strong imaging informatics professionals were the ones that were succeeding in many ways. And the ones that were trying to fill the roles with underqualified professionals, finding themselves with so many problems that you may not even expect, but just, workflow problems, data quality problems, finding themselves in sticky situations with medical legal issues. And, it's not really surprising when you look at the scope of the certification, how many different parts of the workflow it touches and different roles that we're involved with as the imaging informatics professionals. It's pretty much the end-to-end workflow. Imaging informatics professionals have a role to play in all of it, in helping the other professionals in the workflow succeed in their jobs. And so I just can't understate how important it is for employers to really prioritize the position of imaging informatics professionals, and using the certification as a baseline when they're hiring. So anything you'd like to add to that, Kevin, or experiences you've had with that?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. You've really done a great job explaining the value and what, not only from the through the lens of the employer, but also as someone who holds the certification. So, yeah.
Well, I think with that, we can wrap up. I want to thank everybody for your time. I'm here, and I know Kevin's available for anyone out there that has questions about the certification or suggestions on how we can make the certification better, more valuable to those that hold it. So just want to thank all the viewers for watching this, and we'll look forward to seeing you again on the next episode of Vega Insights. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.